Hey, Joe, welcome to the Virtual CMO podcast. I'm so glad that you could join us today.
Eric, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
That's exciting because we're going to get a chance to delve into a topic here that we really haven't gone into very much on this show, but couldn't be a better topic for this time that we have been in and are in, which is really the whole topic of e-commerce and really the changing landscape and how that's affecting businesses. And so I'm very excited to get into it. Before we kind of kick it off, I'd love it if you could just give people, a 20-second introduction to where you're from and what you do.
Sure. I'm Joe Scartz, the Chief Digital Commerce Officer at TPN and the President of Velocity Commerce Group, which is a part of TPN focused on e-commerce. That's what we do. We help clients in 4 key areas. I'll just list them off quickly for you. Amazon is a focus area of ours. We've been working on the platform for almost a decade. Pure play, so identifying those next growth opportunities in e-commerce for those pure play e-commerce, either startups or established brands where you want to distribute your product. Third one is a big one, omnichannel, Walmart, Target, Kroger, Albertson, those types of platforms. Obviously, e-commerce is a much, much bigger component of it was than even before, clearly before COVID. And then lastly, D2C. So how do you manage all 4 of those e-commerce channels for your brand and have success? So that's what we help clients do in a nutshell.
Well, I think you were in a good space, coming into COVID, right? This has been transformational, I think, in terms of the e-commerce business. It was booming already, but, you can't walk out your front door anymore without getting hit by a post office car, a UPS car, Amazon delivery vehicle. There is so much e-commerce that's taking place. From your perspective, what have you really seen over the course of the past year?
We have seen brands have to shift pretty fast. I don't know if I want to mention the brand, but we had one client who was pretty dependent upon their brick and mortar locations. Although they did have products, they were a service and product hybrid type of business. And we had already been talking to them, luckily, about launching on Amazon as a third-party seller on the platform. So for people that don't know, you're 1P, you sell direct to Amazon, and if you're 3P, you're selling as a seller through their marketplace, which of course is a dynamic that has made them so successful over the years and having both of those relationships with manufacturers. But anyway, we had already started talking to them about 3P, but no work had started. We just had some conversations about, you've got these product lines we can take direct to the consumer, which are separate from what you do on the service side of your business, but clearly complementary, although a very tiny percentage of their total business. So we kind of dragged those conversations along in December and January, February, and then all of a sudden, when the NCAA tournament got shut down, it was time to get up on Amazon real fast. And so we launched this brand on Amazon in days, and eventually got them set up with Fulfilled by Amazon, which allows them to ship out of the Amazon warehouses, allows prime shipping for the consumer. And now it has actually taken and grown. I don't even know how to say it without giving away the numbers, but let's just say that that few percentage points of their business that the actual hard good product is now a much larger portion of their business than it was 12 months ago, which is a shift they never would have made. And I think it's really important to know it has been a really challenging, exhilarating, bittersweet period for anybody, I think, working in e-com, because obviously the macro conditions, just generalities of life that we're all dealing with, are extremely difficult and certainly devastating for many. But as far as the business side of things goes, it has created unbelievable, as probably other people on this podcast, or no doubt, Eric, people that you talk to know, it has created incredible opportunity for people that were positioned for the change, and even for companies that were maybe lagging behind a little bit. The ability to shift their points of distribution into e-commerce, set up e-commerce stores, consider selling direct to the consumer, or creating new relationships with their retail partners where they're maximizing their assets on e-commerce sites, or maximizing their media dollars, or maximizing their supply chain to account for e-commerce. All of those changes, which I believe were coming anyway, just at a slower pace. We're accelerated to the point in the last 12 months where, I don't think there is a turning back at this point. As a brand, you need to think about those 4 channels that I mentioned at the outset, which no doubt they are, but also think about how are you going to grow into the future and what channels are consumers going to be buying on? Because I do think it was a unfortunate and artificial sort of propellant of a growth trend that was coming. In the beginning, there were people who were saying that they expected, these e-commerce numbers to drop as the pandemic ended. Now, that's when we were talking about the pandemic being short-lived. Now that we're seeing it's obviously, continued and will continue to evolve and manifest into a different type of situation with COVID-19. We do not anticipate any drop in e-commerce. We do see a slowing growth rate, but grocery e-commerce, as an example, just because that was the last great category to get deeply disrupted by e-com. That will exceed 10%, and I believe that it will continue to grow even more rapidly in the future as consumers get close to Instacart and things like that. So, sorry, you asked me a simple question, and I could have just.
No, that's a great. No, that's a good answer. So I'd love to just kind of deconstruct this a little bit. So if you're a business, you make widgets, you've got a product that has broad national, international appeal. You believe that you could grow your business exponentially by selling it online. What are the benefits and disadvantages to the different platforms that are out there? So obviously you've got Amazon out there. eBay is still floating around doing business, right? You've got Shopify, you've got places like Etsy. There are all these different marketplaces that seem to appeal to different kinds of businesses selling different kinds of things. If you're a widget maker and you really make sort of goods and services, that are beyond sort of artistic goods or used goods or something like that, is Amazon really the only game in town? What are the differences?
Well, I mean, they clearly, you mentioned a couple of them that are really important. Amazon is great for anybody that wants to sell a product as a seller to a consumer across numerous categories. They are very good for a consumer experience that still, this has evolved over time, and this is an old term, but it is still sort of the haven of the spear fishing commerce experience, where I know that I need a new phone cover for my iPhone. I know that Amazon's got a wide selection of them. I'm going to go in, I'm going to look at the first maybe 2 rows of results on a search query. If I search that way, it's very unlikely that I'll go through a category and there's sort of left-hand navigation and search and get into the phone cover. It's more than likely I'll search in the search bar, find it, look at the top 2 rows, pick one, buy it, right? That's $20 purchase, $19.99, $39.99, depending on what you want to do. But if you're and so it has, as many of your listeners know, commoditized the commerce experience. And it has done a tremendous amount of commoditization to certain brands. Even today, the dynamic still exists where certain brands will not sell on Amazon. Now, many have opened up, and some have come on and some have come off, and now some have exclusive SKUs, and they manage their portfolio in a certain way where they protect certain SKUs, but not others. And this marketplace dynamic, which allows for violations of MAP pricing in certain instances, Amazon fights it, but they do fight the counterfeiters, for example, but they're still there. That scenario and that type of commerce environment isn't particularly well suited towards creators, folks that have curated product of their own, a artisan type of skill where they want to put something out into the world that is appreciated for its intrinsic sort of either artisticness or its uniqueness. For those types of things, clearly, examples like Etsy as a different type of platform for creators to sell direct to consumer is a much more compelling value proposition for them. Because I think people search those sites in different ways. They will do a category-based search. They're less likely to do a freeform search query than they are, say, for example, on Amazon. And they want to find new and novel items. You can find that on Amazon, but it's definitely not the point of the platform.
Yeah.
So, I love, in fact, just last week, my stepmom there in Florida we had a new, I had a new niece in the family. So the grandmother, my stepmother, wanted to get an updated placard for an Etsy sign that we got her years ago with all the grandkids' names on it. And so, of course, she wanted to know who the seller was. Where did I find this? How did I get it? And so, of course, I directed her back to Etsy. And then, what happens in a situation like that is you become, you begin to have an affection for the artist.
Yeah.
In that case, as opposed to the retailer, much like you might with a brand, perhaps. But in that case, she's going to remember, where can I find the artist who built this sign? Are they on Etsy? Do they have their own website? And who knows, that may transition to even perhaps a different type of direct-to-consumer relationship with that artist. So it's just a different buying process.
And where does Shopify fit into the whole process?
I have had great experience of getting to work on some Shopify projects over the last year with great clients. And, I can tell you that it fits directly in that process. Even major brands today, we have a Shopify project going on right now. Even major brands today, mid-sized brands, they'll look to Shopify, maybe the elite Shopify package, which, by the way, is like $300 or $400 a month still, at its base pricing. But it goes down from there. I think you can get down to like $29 a month or $39 a month for. So it has democratized e-commerce in a way that was unthinkable even 10 years ago, really. And Shopify is an extremely important player. So where does Shopify fit in that? That could be the platform that this artist is selling their product on their own website, and then they use Etsy as an additional means of distribution and customer engagement. Even, like I said, major brands are doing it as well if they want to try out direct to consumer. Where do they go? They go to Shopify. They might look at Magento. They might look at BigCommerce. Where they don't go anymore, that they did when I was starting out or doing a lot more of this work, they don't go to IBM WebSphere, build out.
I haven't heard WebSphere in a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a special place in my heart for WebSphere because I spent an entire summer camped out in Malvern, Pennsylvania. Shouldn't mention the retailer, I guess, but people could figure it out. Working on a WebSphere project, and believe me, Shopify is a wonderful innovation compared to some of that. It even works for enterprise when you're looking at trying some things out.
But Shopify is really building your own store.
Yes.
And then there are some things but don't they have some fulfillment as well that helps you?
Yeah, they sure do. And I think that, that's been a big key of all of this is how can you simplify the process of plugging into a third-party logistics company, finding partners for merchandising, warehousing, and then ultimately providing an Amazon-like experience in terms of the logistics side of things, which is not easy to do. I mean, functionally, that's what the FBA platform does. The Fulfilled by Amazon platform does for third-party sellers also, is to guarantee a certain level of customer experience that is met in terms of fast shipping. And of course, they have very stringent demands they place on their sellers. Etsy has some of the similar demands that are placed on sellers in terms of qualification. Same with Target Marketplace, Walmart Marketplace. You have to apply to Walmart. You have to be invited to Target. So as we look at this marketplace growth, there's D2C, there's marketplace growth. Anybody operating a marketplace is holding those sellers to high standards. And then again, in the case of Shopify and D2C, what they're trying to do is, while they don't necessarily hold sellers to those same demands, because they don't, it's a different business model. They're the software and the infrastructure. They don't have a relationship with the consumer per se. Shopify doesn't. Amazon does, but Target does. Walmart does. And so they need to protect that relationship. What Shopify does is tries to give you the tools through their partnerships and plugins and third-party developers who create apps for the platform and so forth. They try to give you the tools to recreate a customer experience that is somewhat close to what people might expect out of Amazon and Walmart as it relates to troubleshooting, product shipping, all those sorts of things.
I'm old enough to remember, eBay in its heyday when everybody and their neighbor was trying to sell stuff on there. And people used to be very excited to get a stamps.com kit or something that included a scale so you could weigh your packages and get the appropriate postage. And then people begin to realize what a pain that is, how much time they can spend just preparing everything to ship out and send and drag off to the post office and things like that. Fulfillment is really a game changer, isn't it, in e-commerce? The fact that Amazon can deliver something that you ordered, 4, 5, 6 hours ago to your doorstep, who would have even envisioned that not too many years ago?
Well, and I think it's interesting because now it's one of those amazing things. I wish I had it in front of me. I just don't remember. But when Prime first started out, it was definitely not 48-hour shipping. And in many cases now it's 1-day shipping. I forget what it was. I forget if it was 5 days or what the exact number of days was. But it is a continued game of advancing consumer expectations. And, now you're in a situation with Prime Now where it's a couple of hours, which, Prime Now has been out for a couple of years now. And that's their modus operandi. There was a big article, which I only made it halfway through this morning, today's Wall Street Journal, talking about Amazon. It's actually, I still have it up on my browser. How strong is Amazon's hold over some of these partners? Because they're still dealing with some of the antitrust issues that are going to, I think, continue to be in the news for quite some time. And so as they look at, controlling the entire consumer path to purchase, Amazon has made everything uber efficient, and means of distribution and connecting with them uber efficient. And they use their clout across multiple businesses to control that relationship with some of those branded manufacturers to drive that efficiency, to pass that value on to the consumer. So how does that relate to what we're talking about? It's been through that force of will that they've been willing to continue to reinvest in this cycle of innovation to get us to a place where you have 2-hour shipping. And the best that some of these other players can do is to try and emulate and learn from that. I would think that if anybody, the one exception always, and we've seen it work now, is Walmart, who has just done an amazing job at playing catch up. They're still not the same percentage of e-com sales, but of course, of total retail sales are much bigger. So you have a big player there who's invested a lot of money, whether it was in Jet or in the series of acquisitions they've made, to play catch up, not only on the customer experience side, the product search side, product pricing side, but on the fulfillment side. And they are famous now for, the idea of a dark store, the idea of product, innovation test labs. They actually have a few of these. One is in New Jersey, for example, where they're testing out the in-store experience and actually trying to, through technology, apply lessons from e-commerce to an in-store environment. And so I'm pivoting a little bit, sorry, but it's this idea of, the success in e-commerce logistics and operations has driven innovation for dull legacy in-store operational models, and even the in-store experience using technology back to the consumer. So it's been a pretty fascinating thing to watch, because you got to remember, even 10 years ago, e-commerce was growing, but it was certainly never going to be a big player in certain categories, grocery being one, apparel being one of the others. And those are two very fast growing categories at this point. So it is interesting now, as the years have gone on, to see in-store borrow lessons from e-commerce, and it almost represents a bit of a full 180 on kind of the way people think about it.
Well, it's interesting how you talk about that as well, because, the analogy that always gets used is about wartime, right? And, you can get tanks to the front line, but if they don't have gas, what difference does it make, right? So logistics are what wins battles. And so much of what has happened, whether you look at the growth of a company like Amazon or a company like Apple, right? A lot of what's happening is behind the scenes logistics that make it work. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, obviously, when you're a participant on a platform like Amazon, they're taking a cut, they squeeze your margins a little bit to be able to do that. One thing that I've noticed now is an increasing number of sponsored posts.
Yeah.
So they're looking to take an additional cut to sponsor a post to get it to the top of the listings. And like you said, just like Google search results, people rarely go beyond a page or two to be able to see what's there. Are you starting to hear from clients that this is really putting the squeeze on margins the more and more they have to sort of pay now to even sponsor their listing to get it higher priority?
It's back in the old days and still today in retail, you paid slotting fees, and so these are the new slotting fees. And the issue is that it's not just about a slotting fee though, because at least then you had a position at retail where people could find you. And so the biggest, I don't know if it's a misconception or a misunderstanding, but the biggest misconception or misunderstanding, I suppose, in e-com today is that, well, because it's an endless aisle, you always have the opportunity for success. That's just not true on many of these big platforms. I mean, yes, there are always going to be amazing success stories, but it's a bit like, in some ways, playing the lottery, assuming no other investment. If you're to put up a product detail page as the 1,945th, I don't know, hair gel, for example.
Right.
And you don't support that with paid media. Effectively, you're not paying a slotting fee per se, but you're not getting slotted. Nobody's finding you. And so it is necessary now to be successful in these platforms to pay that slotting fee, to manage it like it's paid search, and using some of the same sort of strategies, but also new ones and new tools as well. Like we have a partner, PackView, that we use for some of this work. To make sure that you are efficiently drawing the right person to the right product. And then, of course, the product detail page is where they learn what they want to learn and either convert or don't. But absolutely. And Amazon in negotiations with you will also want to understand how much of that product you're willing to invest in. And then, unlike other retailers, of course, those negotiations are less often face-to-face for many brands. They are algorithmic in nature. And to drive that algorithm, you've got to spend money. So it's a fascinating, I mean, it's interesting. People talk about the flywheel effect on driving product sales. There's a flywheel effect in managing your relationship with Amazon too. And that flywheel will not move unless the investment is there to help you get the visibility that you need to help them make the margin that they need to make. So it's an amazing mousetrap, and it's a monopoly. I mean, it's a beast.
One thing that surprised me a little bit, I think it surprised a lot of people, was I don't remember how many months ago this was, but Amazon one day decided to cut their affiliate fees. So, we're living in an age of influencer marketing where a lot of individuals are, because of their influence in one way or another, are helping brands and products sell. And then Amazon comes along and says, well, we're not going to reward anybody for that. We're going to really cut that back. Do you think that was simply the case of we're big enough, we don't need to do this anymore? Or what do you think the thinking was behind that?
I think that there's two things to that. Number one is the former. I agree with that. We don't need to do that anymore, and we can pay little or less to get the same sort of traffic drivers. Number two is, I do believe at their core, and you can read any book on Bezos you want to read about this, or any article or whatever newspaper clipping, they really are hyper focused on the customer. And if in fact they can get a product to market more efficiently, more cheaply, and provide a price and then a customer service for the consumer that's compelling, they're going to do it. And so with a lot of these things, reviews is another great example. They have now discontinued, or are in the process of discontinuing, some highly successful review programs for their third-party sellers. So a different dynamic than the affiliate example you gave. But why would they do that? Why would they do that if I am a marketplace seller and I rely on the early marketplace review seller program? And I think the reason that they do that is, number one, they feel like we can drive more authenticity that is reflected back to the consumer and try and continue to gain trust in a way. They don't want to become Facebook. They already have enough issues with counterfeit and
fake
fraudulent
reviews and
items.
things like that. Yeah.
Yes, fake reviews was huge 2 or 3 years ago in the news, and it still is. And so even with something as benign as an early reviewers program, if in fact they think that will either varnish the customer experience or the implied authenticity of the platform, I think they're moving away from some of those things. And I think, to come back to your question, maybe some of those affiliates either weren't the right types of partners, or there were too many of them that seemed maybe a little shady or shifty, or not where they wanted to be. They don't have to rely on that sort of thing. And cutting the fees is, of course, at its core. And honestly, maybe I'm giving them too much credit. Maybe that was really just them wanting to cut fees. So, but
yeah, well, they're a company very much like Apple mentioned before. They do like control, right? They like to
Yep.
control all aspects of the experience, and they've done such a fantastic job improving customer experience over the years that having somewhat shady characters out there plugging products and getting commissions for that, I can see why that may have been somewhat disturbing. But,
Yeah.
at the same time, I've heard from people who are selling on Amazon, back to this idea of a sponsored post, that, they're happy to take your money for a sponsored post to move you up the listings, but they don't give you as much credit for the sale when it happens as they do when you get an organic sale. And so in some ways you're penalized for having a sponsored post versus an organic sale. It seems like there are a lot of competing factors in there. So, when I talk to clients and they're selling on Amazon today, of course, everybody's looking for a leg up. How can they get their product higher up in the rankings? And even though I think they could save money, save some margin by selling directly, they just keep pumping people to Amazon because they want to move up those listings.
Yeah, they sure do. It is very much in line, and they drop price.
Yeah.
And there's a whole strategy about launching products on Amazon, whereas you may not have needed or wanted price incentives pre-Amazon to do this, or you may have launched with a very limited, hyper-focused price incentive in key areas or in key markets, or where you're trying to disrupt a competitor. But, real brand marketers never liked doing that.
Yeah.
The reality is, to play the algorithm on Amazon, and particularly with a product launch, it's one of the most effective things you can do is just to launch with a vendor power coupon, for God's sake, or some sort of lightning deal or whatever. And it strikes at the core of some clients, and some ultimately don't want to do it and don't, because they come out of the brand school of brand integrity, not no price incentives or low price incentives. Certain categories, of course, are more particular about that than others. But the thing that we remind them of is, no, absolutely, you don't need to be on a price incentive for the duration of the quarter. But if you're going to go out to market with a new campaign or new program, it sure is a good way to jumpstart your position, because, to your point, the value of those organic sales is tremendous. And you want to get as many of those as you can. And in particular, they want to see that you can get somebody into a repeat purchase cycle. So,
Yep.
Incentives, drive, subscribe, and save, get them into help show Amazon that you can drive your own sort of mini flywheel within their big flywheel. And they'll be, to the extent that algorithms are happy, they'll be happy.
Well, I'm curious, with so many people out there selling different things, at what point or at what size does it make sense to engage with a firm like yours? Are you talking millions of dollars worth of revenue, or, tens of thousands worth of goods in terms of numbers? What is a point where it says, if we really want to grow, we need to get an agency involved to really help us push this forward?
We have clients that are startups, and we have clients that are Fortune 500 companies.
Okay.
And the reason that's important is for the startups, or I'll try and distinguish, maybe there's a better way to say this. For the startups, in many cases, maybe like other people you've talked to, we are running their third-party account, or we are running media and we're doing content, or we're doing SEO consulting and we're doing content, or for many, it's a combination of all those things. Plus, we're helping them because they might also have a first-party relationship with Amazon, which is an entirely related but separate sort of engagement. But you don't. There are consultancies, agencies out there for every size of brand. There's
Sure.
It's funny. And I feel like the best thing as either an agency or a consultant or whatever is you can do is be straightforward with these clients and say, look, there's a benefit to going with an independent contractor or consultant. There's a benefit to going with an Amazon specialist, and then there may be a benefit to going to a omnichannel, larger agency that can handle, a lot of different things. And it's about where you are, and it's not always about where you are and your size. It's about where they are in their strategy. Where does Amazon sit in your strategy? Where does Amazon and D2C sit in your strategy? Oh, and by the way, are you really looking to go mass and sell into one of these big retailers? And are you using Amazon or D2C to help tell that story? And is that a story that'll be compelling to, say, for example, Target? And so depending on your answers to those questions, you're going to find the right group to help you. My favorite, I won't be too pitchy, but we do have a case study of a client, this is all I'll say, who got bought by SC Johnson. And, that client didn't pay us a tremendous amount of money. But I was never happier than when that company was bought by SC Johnson a few years ago, based on the work, we did on Amazon. Because that's a real human story. And you don't always get that. I mean, it's always great to help clients build their careers, have success, do the next great thing for the next great consumer packaged good company. But you can build brands on Amazon. You can build brands D2C. You got to think about how they work together, and then find the right partner that can answer those key questions I mentioned a minute ago. Because that is pivotal. And even if you have the time to do it yourself, do it yourself. See what you can learn and not learn. Do it for a while, and then see when you have realized what you don't know how to do or don't have success at, where you need help. That's certainly another way to do it for very, very small organizations. And then you call, one of us.
I think that's great advice, and something, we advise often on this show. I think it's really important that you understand how the tools work and the systems work. And so you can have that high level knowledge so you can speak intelligently about it, but bring in experts, to do things on your behalf when you can afford it, because you can accelerate your growth. You can spend your money more wisely. Experimentation is great, but it's costly, and it takes some time and money to experiment, and time is money. And so you can lose both ways. And so I'm a huge believer in that. So this has been really fascinating stuff. Like I said, we haven't really talked too much about e-commerce on this show, and you've been a great guest to have on to talk more about it. As we kind of wrap things up here today, I'd love it if you could just share with the audience where they can find more about you and your company online, and we'll make sure we link that up in the show notes as well.
Yeah, well, I hope they can find me sometime in the near future at a trade show near you. I used to go to them all, Shop Talk and CES, NRF. And I missed that part of the job, and I miss connecting with people that way. But I'll see them there in 2022. It looks like, hopefully. But other than that, you can find me at either tpnretail.com or velocitycommerce.com. We are a part of Omnicom, the media holding company, and I'm always happy to be on a show like this and get to connect. I'm glad we got to do this, Eric. It's been a ton of fun. So thanks again for having me. I love that. I love your background too, by the way. I keep looking at that flag in the back. It's nice. I got to get out of. I'm in my. It's funny when you work at home and your wife works at home. I found what's good. Maybe it's best to leave on like marriage tips. I don't know. You got people listening might already know, but I was looking at your office there and I was jealous while you were letting me do my plug, and it looks so nice and things are organized. I like the American flag, and I'm like up in the corner room here. My wife. What I found, the marriage tip is a free thing you can do if you both work from home is to give them the office space. And, you're the hero for at least a day or two. So anyways.
I think it's so funny that you mentioned that. I have so many people comment on the background, but half the time it's people looking at my whiteboard to see what they can see in the reflection. They're trying to see if, I'm hiding something in the background or whatever. But people tend to pay attention to what's in the background. And it's not one of those funny, blurry Zoom backgrounds either.
Yeah, it's nice. It's very nice. It's good.
Yeah, well,
thanks
very
again
much
for having me. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much for being on the show. We really do appreciate it.